scones were untouched. The tea had gone cold, but no one moved. In a quiet corner of First Baptist's community hall, 5 church moms sat in a semicircle of floral blouses and folded hands. Their eyes darted around like they were waiting for someone else to say it first. "I just think, we do not know the full story," murmured Mrs. Granger, the principal's wife, adjusting the clasp of her purse like it could settle the tension in her voice. "Boys these days are mouthy." A rustle of approval, not spoken but shared. Then came a softer voice, half whispered, half weary. "But he is a child." That sheriff hit a child. Mrs. Winslow leaned forward, chin sharp with certainty. Maybe the boy got too comfortable talking back. Some kids forget their place. They never said his name, but they did not have to. The way they said boy made it clear who they were talking about and what they really meant. The room held its breath. Outside, the church bell rang once, as if to mark a line no one wanted to cross. Malcolm Harris, 15 freshman at Lincoln High, had raised his hand during a school assembly to ask why a certain policy was unfair. The mic had not even crackled. Off before Sheriff Rick Devereaux, who had been standing near the stage, walked up and slapped him. No warning, no words. Just the echo of skin on skin and the stunned silence of 500 people pretending they had not seen what they saw. By the next morning, no statement had been made, no charges, no suspension, not even a note home, just a line in the local newspaper. Minor disruption at Lincoln High. Officials respond. The town moved quickly, not to find the truth, but to bury the mess. Mayor Dorsey called it an unfortunate misunderstanding. Superintendent Albright refused to comment. And Sheriff Devereaux? He showed up to work the next day with hot coffee in one hand and sunglasses on his face, like nothing had happened. But something had. You could feel it in the way people talked, cautiously, in lowered tones, or not at all. Especially not at the hardware store, especially not at the diner. But behind closed doors, especially in spaces like this, church basements, salon chairs, front porches, they were all talking. Just not about justice. They were talking about how Malcolm had embarrassed the town, how maybe he should have stayed in his seat, how Sheriff Devereaux had served this community for years, and maybe that should count for something. They were not defending what happened. They were defending the idea that nothing needed to change, and that, not the slap, not the silence, was the real danger. Because in Pine Hollow, order always came before truth. And when the cost of telling the truth fell on a black boy's face, the town did not flinch. It folded its hands and kept pouring tea. The town hall had not been that full since the flood in '07. Folding chairs lined every inch of the tiled floor. Some folks stood shoulder to shoulder in the back, arms crossed, mouths tight. The overhead fans hummed, stirring warm air and thick unease. At the front, under the harsh fluorescent lights, Mayor Dorsey cleared his throat into the mic. "We're here tonight to listen," he said slowly, like every syllable needed approval. "This community has always found its way through conversation, not confrontation." Someone coughed. Someone else scoffed. On the third row, Lena Harris did not move. She had not come to be reasonable. Her son's cheek had been swollen for 2 days. The redness had faded, but the memory had not. She could still hear the slap, not in person, but in her head, like it had marked her too. The mayor kept talking, saying a lot and meaning nothing. Words like context, history, and restraint floated in the air like perfume sprayed to cover a bad smell, and then Lena stood up. No microphone. No permission. Just her voice. "My son raised his hand to ask a question," she said, loud enough for the back rows to hear. "And he was hit, in front of everyone, by a man wearing a badge." The mayor paused mid-sentence. Eyes turned. "That badge is supposed to protect our children, not punish them." A few heads nodded. One woman clapped. Another pulled her hands into her lap. Sheriff Rick Devereaux sat in the corner, arms crossed, jaw set. He had not spoken publicly yet, and still did not. His silence felt louder than Lena's words. "I have lived in this town my whole life," Lena said, her voice tightening. "I pay taxes. I go to church. I raise my son right. So do not tell me to be calm. Do not ask me to wait. Tell me why. A grown man can hit a child, and the only thing people want to talk about is how uncomfortable it makes them feel." She sat back down, not shaking, not blinking. The room held still for one long second. Then the noise erupted. Some clapped. Others booed. Someone yelled, "This ain't the place!" The mayor banged his gavel once, weakly. But it was too late. The meeting had become a moment. By morning, video from someone's phone was online. A local reporter posted Lena's speech with the caption, "Mother of slapped teen speaks out." By noon, it had 40,000 views. Outside town, people were paying attention. Inside, the walls were closing in. The school district released a short statement. "We are committed to a safe environment for all students." The sheriff's office declined to comment. Sheriff Devereaux still showed up every morning, still parked in his usual spot. But something had changed. Malcolm returned to school that Thursday. No cameras, no press, just heavy stares. Some kids clapped when he walked in. Others turned away. His math teacher called him Mr. Harris now, like respect could be handed out after the fact. The principal avoided eye contact altogether. At lunch, he sat near the end of the table. A boy from gym class leaned over and said, "You're like a legend now." Malcolm just looked at his tray. He did not feel like a legend. He felt like a crack in the wall, the first break in something long held together by silence. And cracks, he knew, do not always mean change. Sometimes they just mean something is about to fall apart. The lunchroom felt louder now. Not because anyone shouted, but because Malcolm could hear everything. Every tray clatter, every whisper that stopped when he passed, every sideways glance that carried meaning he could not decode. He sat across from Dre Foster, who poked at a slice of pizza like it owed him an answer. "You good?" Dre asked, without looking up. Malcolm shrugged. "Depends what good means." Dre finally looked up. He had that way of seeing through things, like he knew the weight Malcolm was carrying without being told. "You messed up the fantasy," Dre said flatly. "What?" "Fantasy? That this place is fair, that if you just stay in line, raise your hand, play nice, you'll be okay." He took a bite, chewed slowly. You stood up and reminded everybody that ain't always true, and that scared the hell out of him. Malcolm leaned back. He had not asked to be a symbol, had not planned to challenge anyone. He had asked a question. "That was it. I didn't want all this," he said. "I just wanted to know why we were reading from a history book that skipped half the truth." Dre nodded. "And now you're the truth they can't skip." That night, Malcolm could not sleep. Again, he lay on his back, staring at the shadowed ceiling of his room, listening to the soft hum of a distant streetlight and the occasional dog bark. On his nightstand, his phone buzzed every few minutes. Mentions, notifications, headlines, local teen Sparkstown reckoning. 15-year-old stands up to authority and pays the price. Youth activist Malcolm Harris. He locked the screen, turned it face down. He had never called himself that. Activist, leader, changemaker. He had just been a kid in a civics class, asking why things were the way they were. Now people expected speeches, statements, strength. But he felt hollow. His mother passed by the door and peeked in. "You all right, baby?" He nodded without turning. "Just thinking." She hesitated. "Thinking's good. Just don't let it eat you up." He waited until her footsteps faded, then sat up and grabbed his notebook, the one he used to sketch shoe designs, not thoughts. But tonight, words came out. What if I'm doing too much? What if I'm not doing enough? What if I said the wrong thing? What if they only listen until it's inconvenient? He set the pen down. He was tired. Not the kind sleep fixed. The kind that came from holding your shoulders up for too long, pretending you were okay because everyone needed you to be strong. In the quiet, he whispered a question, one he had not even said aloud to. Dre, what if I broke something, and now I can't fix it? Because here was the truth no one told him. Speaking up sounded brave. But living with the echo of that choice, the silence from some friends, the weight of strangers' praise, the spotlight you never asked for, that was the part that hollowed you out. He stared at the wall where he had taped a poster last summer. It said, "Be the change." He used to like how it sounded. Now, he wondered why no one ever warned you what change cost. The sheriff's department opened that Monday like it was any other day. Sheriff Roland Devereaux stepped out of his black SUV, coffee in hand, badge shining. No statement, no explanation. Just walked inside as if the town outside had not changed, but the building felt thinner. 3 deputies had called in sick. One left his badge and firearm in a box with a 2-line resignation note. The front desk clerk barely looked up when Devereaux passed. Everyone knew what happened. The footage was everywhere now. But no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Outside TI, at City Hall, the mayor's phone rang nonstop. Parents flooded the school board's voicemail. Some demanded change, others defended the sheriff, citing respect for authority and context. But the town was no longer split down the middle. It was fracturing in sharp angles. Families, neighbors, co-workers now stood on opposite sides of an invisible line. Outside the school, protest signs rose like weeds. No justice, no peace. Our kids deserve better. Accountability. For Devereaux. Inside, teachers walked hallways under tight smiles, unsure of what to say. Students whispered louder now. Malcolm's name carried weight, not just as a classmate, but as a symbol. Still, the sheriff remained untouched. No charges. No public reprimand. Whispers of internal reviews floated around, but nothing official. Because here was the truth. Arresting Devereaux meant taking a swing at the system that had built itself around him. He was not just a sheriff. He was the cousin of the county judge, a regular donor to local campaigns, a decorated veteran with a 30-year clean service record, at least on paper. He was the system, and systems protect their own. Then, quietly, without press or fanfare, Serena Vale came to town. A civil rights attorney known for her calm precision, Serena had spent decades walking into messes just like this. She did not do press conferences. She did not shout in parking lots. She met in corners of city halls, in quiet booths at local diners, and let the pressure build from the inside. Her first visit was with the mayor. Behind closed doors, no aides present. What they discussed never leaked, but by morning, things moved. A formal inquiry was announced. The sheriff was placed on administrative leave, pending review. The mayor issued a vague statement about accountability and community standards, but still, no apology, no direct mention of Malcolm, no admission of wrongdoing. Sheriff Devereaux released his own statement through his lawyer. I have always acted in the best interest of public safety. Any suggestion otherwise is politically motivated. Malcolm saw the clip on his phone during lunch. Dre leaned over. Translation, I'm not sorry and I still think I'm right. Malcolm did not reply. He had stopped hoping for apologies. He was learning something colder. Systems do not feel shame, only pressure. And now pressure was building. News vans parked outside the courthouse. Legal scholars debated case law on podcasts. Civil rights organizations released statements. Some locals called it overblown. Others wondered what took so long. But something had shifted. For the first time, Devereaux's badge did not feel untouchable. His silence no longer felt like control. It felt like fear. And in a quiet office above Main Street, Serena Vale began reviewing affidavits and sworn testimonies, her fingers tracing every word like she was charting a map. Not just for justice, but for accountability that would last longer than headlines, because she had seen too many towns like this one, where silence was survival and truth was always the last thing allowed through the door. This time, she intended to change that. The folding chairs in the gymnasium squeaked as parents, teachers, and students filled them in cautious silence. The bleachers were pulled out, the same polished floor where Malcolm had once raised his hand and been struck for it, now repurposed for a community conversation. No one called it what it really was, a reckoning. The school board sat behind a long plastic table. The mayor hovered near the edge. Cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking like unblinking eyes. Serena Vale stood to the side, arms folded, watching everything and giving nothing away. Malcolm sat in the third row next to his mother. She wore the same calm mask she had put on since everything began. The one that said, "I'm proud of you, but I wish the world did not ask so much of you." Dre sat on Malcolm's other side, quiet, scanning the room like he was mapping escape routes. The agenda had no surprises, introductions, statements, then public comment. Malcolm did not plan to speak. He had not written anything, had not practiced in the mirror. He was tired of the attention, of the silence that followed him, of the weight that came with simply asking a question out loud. The microphone passed from one speaker to another. Some praised the school, others demanded action. A few veiled their anger in polished words about respecting both sides. Then someone said his name. And if he's willing, I believe the student at the center of all this deserves the microphone. 2. Malcolm Harris? Everything stopped. Malcolm's hands went cold. His mother touched his arm gently. She did not say yes or no. He stood. The gym held its breath as he walked to the microphone. The echo of his sneakers against the floor felt impossibly loud. He adjusted the mic, cleared his throat, looked at the room, faces familiar and distant, curious and judgmental, supportive and skeptical. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but it carried. "I raised my hand to ask a question," he said. "Not to start a fight." The room stayed. Still, I wanted to know why our textbooks skipped over entire parts of history, why we were being taught a version of the world that left people like me out. He glanced at the principal, then the superintendent, then back at the crowd. I did not break the rules. I followed them. I raised my hand. I waited to be called on. I asked a question. He paused, and I got slapped. A few gasps, a few lowered eyes. Malcolm kept going. "I'm 15. I'm still figuring out who I am. But I know this. School is supposed to be where we learn to think, not where we're punished for thinking too hard." He took a breath. I did not want to be in the news. I did not want strangers calling me brave or angry or dangerous. I wanted to learn. I still do. He looked toward his classmates. We deserve better than silence. We deserve teachers who welcome questions, not fear them. And we deserve books that tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. No applause yet. Just a deep collective stillness. Then, one clap, then two. Then it built. Slowly, then louder. Not a standing ovation, not a performance. Just respect. The kind you give someone who said something you could not. Malcolm nodded once and walked back to his seat. His mother wiped at her eyes, quickly. Dre gave him a side glance, then a small nod. He sat down feeling lighter, not because the world was fixed, but because, for the first time, he had said the thing he needed to say. He was still Malcolm. Still 15, still tired. But now, no one could say he had not spoken. And in that gym, on the same floor where silence had once met violence, his voice had finally been heard. 2 weeks later, The town woke to a headline that barely registered, with some but meant everything to others. Officer Devereaux resigns from County Sheriff's Office. No press conference. No statement, no dramatic footage, just a scanned letter on department letterhead, folded and filed. A line near the end read, "Effective immediately. I am stepping away to allow the department to move forward." Malcolm read it on his phone while waiting for the bus. He blinked once, then locked the screen. No celebration. No smile. Just quiet acknowledgement that sometimes exits speak louder than apologies. At school, something else had shifted. Ms. Calloway, the civics teacher who had once told Malcolm to ask better questions next time, now stood at the front of the room wearing a different badge, assistant principal. Her tone had changed too, not in some grand, sweeping way, but in smaller moments, like calling students by their full names, asking questions instead of assuming answers, and listening longer before speaking. Malcolm noticed. He also noticed the flyers around school now had different language. Student-led council. Building our future together. He had not planned to join, but Dre had nudged him, and Ms. Calloway had handed him the form herself, without pressure, just hope. At the first meeting, 7 students sat in a circle in the library. Different backgrounds, different reputations, same curiosity. They started simple, better textbooks, clearer complaint systems, open forums with teachers. They were not trying to flip the system overnight, just widen the cracks, enough for truth to get through. Back at home, Lena, Malcolm's mother, kept her routine. Same evening tea, same music humming low from the kitchen. But some nights, she paused in the hallway and looked in on her son a little longer. Not with worry, with quiet pride. She never said you were right. She just said, "You stood up when it mattered. That's enough." At the courthouse, a new nameplate was screwed into the door. Sheriff Carla Monroe. Her appointment had been fast-tracked, not because the system wanted change, but because the system had been caught without an excuse not to. Carla was not loud. She did not come in swinging, but at her first press briefing, she stepped up to the mic and delivered a single measured line. "Badges don't excuse bad behavior. They never have. They never will." The room had gone still. Reporters scribbled notes. Some locals clapped. Others just nodded. Not because the town was healed, but because finally someone said what needed saying. That afternoon, Malcolm passed the front office on his way to class. On the wall was a new photo. The student leadership group, taken just outside the library. He was in it, standing a little to the side, half smiling. Dre had thrown up 2 fingers in peace. The rest had beamed like they were standing at the start of something that had not been built yet, but could be. Malcolm stopped for a second, looked at his own face in the frame. He did not feel like a leader, not a hero, definitely not an activist. He still felt tired, still unsure, but he also felt something else, something steadier. Not pride, not relief, just real. He kept walking. Behind him, the photo stayed where it was, quiet and still. A reminder to everyone who passed. Change did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered, walked down a hallway, and showed up the next day ready to try again. The bell had just rung, and the hallway buzzed with the usual shuffle of sneakers, locker, slams, and low voices. Malcolm moved through it quietly, his books hugged to his chest, not searching for attention, just trying to reach his next class unnoticed. That was when he felt a tap on his elbow. He turned. It was Eli, a kid from his civics class. Always sat in the back, never raised his hand. Malcolm could barely remember hearing his voice at all. Eli looked nervous, like the words might crack on the way out. But he said them anyway. "Hey, I just wanted to say thanks. For that day. For saying something." Malcolm blinked, unsure what to say. Eli shifted, then added softly, "I didn't know we were allowed to speak like that." Malcolm stared for a beat, then reached into his notebook. Not the big one he used for homework, but the small one with scuffed corners and blank pages he used for thoughts he did not want to lose. He tore out a sticky note and wrote something. In block letters, we always were. They just made us feel like we weren't. He handed it to Eli, who read it, smiled, small but real, and tucked it into his pocket like it was something worth keeping. That evening, as the sun sank low behind the trees, Serena Vale returned. No headlines, no interviews. Just her, stepping out of a dusty rental car and walking up the steps of the school with a tote bag slung over her shoulder. She did not ask to meet with the mayor. She did not knock on the sheriff's door. She asked for one person, Malcolm. They walked the school grounds in silence at first, passing the gym where everything started, the courtyard where students now gathered for leadership meetings, the wall where someone had painted a mural of raised hands in different skin tones. Finally, Serena reached into her bag and pulled out a worn paperback, corners curled, cover faded, pages underlined in blue ink. James Baldwin, she handed it to Malcolm. Keep learning, she said. Keep questioning. He took it, nodding quietly. No speech, no need. Later that night, back in his room, Malcolm sat cross-legged on the floor flipping through the book. In the front cover, Serena had scribbled a note. The world changes when someone stops asking for permission to care. He closed the book and leaned back against the wall. Outside his window, the neighborhood was still. Porch lights blinked on. Somewhere a dog barked. But here, in this moment, there was peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had shifted, and somewhere, in another classroom, on another bus, in another hallway, maybe another quiet voice was ready to ask a hard question. 2. Because that was the truth. No one could silence. One voice, even if quiet, can shake the walls of silence. You may never be in Malcolm's shoes, but you will have your moment, and when it comes, may you remember, you always were allowed to speak.